These 4 pennies could completely change the way you look at loose change, because hidden inside ordinary coins are rare versions that collectors are quietly paying serious attention to, and most people spend them without ever checking what they really have. The presidency in Washington, D.C. Because this is where the story of Abraham Lincoln reaches its peak. Not the beginning, not the struggle, not the education, not even the early career, but the moment where a man shaped by hardship, learning, and law becomes the leader of a nation divided by one of the most dangerous conflicts in its history. And somehow, this entire transformation is captured on something most people barely notice in their pocket, a penny. At first glance, it still looks ordinary. Small, copper-colored, easy to ignore. But when you understand what it represents, it stops being just change. It becomes a symbol of leadership, responsibility, and one of the most critical eras in American history. The reverse design of the 2009 Lincoln Cent presidency in Washington, D.C. shows Abraham Lincoln standing in front of the unfinished U.S. Capitol dome. Behind him, construction is still ongoing, symbolizing a nation that is not yet complete, still being built, still struggling with unity. That detail alone carries deep meaning. Because when Lincoln became president in 1861, the United States was already breaking apart. Several southern states had seceded, and civil war was no longer a possibility, it was already beginning. The country was divided, uncertain, and unstable. And Lincoln stepped into leadership at exactly that moment. So the unfinished Capitol dome on the coin is not just architecture. It is a metaphor. A nation still under construction. A democracy still being tested. A presidency defined by crisis. This coin captures that weight in a way that is subtle but powerful. Now imagine Lincoln himself in that moment. Not a symbolic figure carved into metal, but a real man walking into Washington, D.C., carrying the responsibility of a collapsing union. He was not stepping into comfort or stability. He was stepping into conflict, pressure, and historical judgment. And that is exactly what this design tries to communicate. Unlike earlier stages of his life shown in the 2009 series, this one does not focus on learning or career building. It focuses on leadership under pressure, decision-making under chaos, and the burden of holding a country together when everything is pulling it apart. The United States Mint released this design as the final part of the 4-coin 2009 Lincoln Bicentennial series. It completes the visual biography of Lincoln, starting from his birth in Kentucky, moving through Indiana and Illinois, and ending in Washington, D.C. with the presidency. Each coin builds on the last. But this one feels different. It feels like an ending. Because in many ways, it is. After 2009, the Mint returned to the classic Lincoln Memorial reverse design, making this series a unique, one-year-only historical tribute. That means these 4 designs exist as a complete narrative only in that single year, never repeated again in the same form. And that gives them a special place in modern numismatics. Now, from a collector's perspective, the 2009 Presidency Cent is widely available in circulation, just like the others in the series. Millions were minted. It was never meant to be rare in the traditional sense. But rarity in coin collecting is not always about how many were made. Sometimes it is about condition, preservation, and collector demand. Coins that remain in pristine, uncirculated condition with strong details and original mint luster can attract attention from serious collectors. And when coins are graded at high levels by professional grading services, their value can increase depending on market demand. There are also special variations and mint errors that occasionally surface. These include misstrikes, doubled elements, or unusual production anomalies. While most examples are minor and do not dramatically change value, certain rare conditions can make collectors take a closer look. However, it is important to stay grounded. Most regular circulated examples of this coin remain close to face value. Even uncirculated pieces typically sell within modest ranges depending on condition. Only exceptional certified specimens or unique era coins reach significantly higher prices in specialized collector markets. But the true value of this coin is not just financial. It is historical storytelling in physical form. This coin represents the final transformation of Abraham Lincoln. From a child in a log cabin, to a self-educated young man in Indiana, to a practicing lawyer in Illinois, and finally to the President of the United States during one of the most violent and defining periods in American history. Each stage of the 2009 series builds toward this final image. And in this final design, Lincoln is no longer learning, or preparing, or practicing. He is leading. He is responsible for decisions that would shape the future of an entire nation. Decisions about war, unity, freedom, and survival. His leadership during the Civil War ultimately preserved the United States and led to the abolition of slavery, making his presidency one of the most consequential in American history. And all of that is symbolically compressed into a small coin that fits in the palm of your hand. That is what makes modern commemorative coinage so fascinating. It turns complex history into visual storytelling. It transforms political legacy into accessible art. And it allows everyday people to unknowingly carry pieces of history in their pockets. Most people who handle this penny will never think twice about it. It will be used in small transactions, stored in jars, or mixed into change without a second thought. But for collectors and historians, it represents something much deeper. It represents the final chapter of a life that started in complete poverty and ended in global historical impact. It represents leadership under pressure. It represents a nation under construction. And it represents the moment when Abraham Lincoln became more than a man, he became a symbol. That is why the 2009 Lincoln presidency cent is more than just a coin in a series. It is the conclusion of a story that spans 4 designs, 4 stages, and one of the most influential lives in American history. So the next time you come across a 2009 penny, especially one showing the US Capitol with Lincoln standing in front of it, take a second look. Because what you are holding is not just currency. It is the final scene of a historical journey, captured in metal, still circulating quietly through everyday life, reminding us that even the smallest objects can carry the largest stories. If you've been following the journey of the 2009 Lincoln Cent series, then you already know this was not an ordinary year for American coinage. It was a rare moment when a simple 1-cent coin stopped being just currency and became a timeline of a man's life, carefully told in 4 small visual chapters. And now the story reaches one of the most important turning points. The professional life in Illinois. At this stage, Abraham Lincoln is no longer just a boy reading books in a quiet Indiana forest, and he is no longer the child growing up in a Kentucky log cabin. This is the moment where his life steps into public society, law, responsibility, and the beginning of political awareness. And somehow, all of that is captured on a coin that still passes through everyday hands without most people realizing what it represents. Imagine holding it for a moment. A simple penny. Copper-colored, small, easy to overlook. But if you look closer, it tells a completely different story. The reverse design of the 2009 professional life in Illinois cent shows Abraham Lincoln standing in front of the Illinois State Capitol. He is portrayed as a young lawyer, dressed in formal attire, holding documents that symbolize his legal career. Behind him rises the structure of government, representing his growing involvement in politics and law. This is not just artwork. It is a visual transformation. Because this is the stage where Lincoln shifts from education and survival into action and influence. Before becoming the 16th President of the United States, Lincoln built his foundation in Illinois as a lawyer. He practiced law across the Illinois circuit courts, traveling from town to town, often by horse, handling cases in small courtrooms filled with ordinary citizens. He was known for his honesty, sharp reasoning, and ability to connect with people from all walks of life. And that is exactly what this coin tries to capture. Not power. Not fame. But the beginning of public responsibility. The United States Mint released this coin in 2009 as part of a 4-design series honoring Lincoln's life journey. Each design represents a different stage, and the professional life in Illinois is the 3rd chapter. It sits right in the middle of his transformation, between humble beginnings and national leadership. In terms of circulation, this coin was minted in huge quantities at facilities like Philadelphia and Denver, meaning it is still relatively common in everyday change. But here is where collectors begin to pay attention differently. Because not all coins are equal, even when they share the same design. Condition becomes everything. A coin that has been carefully preserved, with sharp details still visible on Lincoln's figure, clean edges, and original mint luster, can be significantly more desirable than one that has been heavily circulated. Collectors often refer to these pristine examples as high-grade coins, and they are evaluated under strict grading systems that determine their market interest. But beyond condition, there is something else that always captures attention in modern coin collecting: error coins. Sometimes during the minting process, small mistakes occur. These are not intentional, but they happen due to pressure, alignment, or mechanical variation. And while most people would consider them flaws, collectors often see them as unique signatures of rarity. A slightly misaligned strike, a doubled image, or an unusual surface variation can turn an ordinary penny into a conversation piece in the numismatic world. For the 2009 Professional Life Cent, most examples are normal circulation coins, but certain high-grade or error varieties have attracted strong interest among collectors who specialize in modern Lincoln cents. Still, it's important to stay realistic. Despite many online rumors and exaggerated claims, the majority of these coins are not worth thousands of dollars. Most remain close to face value unless they fall into exceptional categories such as top-grade certified specimens or verified mint errors with strong demand. But that does not reduce their importance. Because value in coin collecting is not only about price. It is also about meaning. This coin represents a critical transition in Lincoln's life. It is the moment where he steps into society not as a student, not as a child, but as a professional shaping his identity through law and public service. He worked as a lawyer in Illinois for over 2 decades before becoming president. During this time, he handled thousands of cases, debated legal arguments, and developed the communication skills that would later define his leadership during one of the most difficult periods in American history. The Illinois state capital shown on the coin is not just a background detail. It represents the environment where governance, law, and democracy were actively shaping the future of the state and the nation. And Lincoln standing in front of it symbolizes his entry into that system. When you think about it, this coin is not just about history. It is about progression. It shows how a person evolves from education, to profession, to leadership. And that is why the 2009 Lincoln Cent series is so unique. It is not just a commemorative release. It is a structured narrative told through currency. 4 coins. 4 stages. 1 life story. Birth in Kentucky. Formative years in Indiana. Professional life in Illinois. And finally, the presidency in Washington, D.C. Each one connects to the next like chapters in a book, except the book is made of metal, and it passes through millions of hands every day. The professional life in Illinois cent sits in the heart of this journey. It represents stability before power, learning before leadership, practice before presidency. And that is what makes it so fascinating to collectors and historians alike. Because when people collect coins like this, they are not just collecting metal. They are collecting moments in time. Pieces of storytelling that were never meant to be rare, but become meaningful through design, history, and perspective. Even today, many people unknowingly carry this coin in their wallets or receive it in change without realizing its significance. It is still circulating, still moving, still telling Lincoln's story one transaction at a time. And that is the quiet beauty of it. You don't need to visit a museum to see history. Sometimes, history comes to you in the form of a small penny handed back in change at a store. So the next time you see a 2009 penny with Abraham Lincoln standing in front of the Illinois state capitol, take a second look. Because you are not just looking at a coin. You are looking at a moment when a young lawyer was still building the foundation that would one day change a nation. And that is what makes the professional life in Illinois cent far more than just 1 cent. If you've ever held a small copper coin in your hand and thought it was nothing special, you might want to pay close attention to what I'm about to tell you, because sometimes the smallest things in your pocket can carry the biggest secrets in American coin history. In 2009, something very unusual happened in the world of US currency. The United States Mint released a special version of the Lincoln cent that was unlike anything seen before in modern circulation. It wasn't just another penny. It was part of a carefully designed commemorative series honoring the life of Abraham Lincoln, and more specifically, the early stages of his journey from humble beginnings to one of the most respected presidents in American history. This particular segment of the coin series focused on Lincoln's birth and early childhood in Kentucky. It may sound simple at first, just a small design change on the reverse side of a penny, but behind it lies a deep historical narrative, artistic craftsmanship, and a collector frenzy that still echoes today. Now imagine this. A coin so ordinary looking that most people wouldn't even pick it up from the ground, yet in certain rare conditions, collectors have been willing to pay extraordinary amounts for it. Some versions, especially in pristine condition, with mint errors or special strikes, have created waves in the numismatic community. But before we talk about value, you need to understand why this coin even exists. For nearly half a century, the Lincoln cent had maintained a consistent design featuring the Lincoln Memorial on the back. But in 2009, the US Mint decided to completely break tradition. Instead of one design, they released 4 different reverse designs, each representing a different stage of Lincoln's life. The first one shows his birth and early childhood in Kentucky, symbolizing his humble beginnings in a log cabin environment, surrounded by the raw and undeveloped frontier land of early America. This wasn't just a design change. It was a storytelling decision. Every detail on the coin was meant to reflect hardship, simplicity, and the foundation of a man who would later lead a nation through its darkest civil war. The log cabin itself is one of the most powerful symbols on this coin. It represents struggle, poverty, and resilience. Lincoln was born into a world with very little comfort, and this coin captures that reality in metal form. The craftsmanship is detailed enough that even on such a small surface, you can see the wooden texture of the cabin, the rural environment, and the sense of early American frontier life. Now let's talk about the minting process, because this is where things become even more interesting. The 2009 Lincoln cents were produced in massive quantities for circulation, but not all coins are created equal. They were struck in different mint facilities, primarily Philadelphia and Denver, and subtle differences between these mint marks can significantly affect collector interest. Coins from special uncirculated sets or high-grade conditions can become far more desirable than regular pocket change. The composition is also important. Unlike older wheat pennies made mostly of copper, the 2009 cent is primarily zinc with a thin copper coating. That alone changed how the coin ages over time. While it looks copper at first glance, under the surface it behaves differently, and that affects its long-term preservation. Now here's where collectors start to get excited. In the world of coin collecting, condition is everything. A coin that looks perfect under magnification, with no scratches, no wear, and strong original mint luster, can be exponentially more valuable than the same coin found in circulation. This is where grading services come in, assigning numerical values that can turn a 1-cent piece into something worth hundreds or even thousands of dollars depending on rarity and demand. Some high-grade examples of the 2009 birth and early childhood cent have been sold for impressive amounts in auctions and private sales. While many circulate for face value, certain era coins or specially preserved specimens have attracted serious attention from collectors who specialize in modern US coins. Now, you might be wondering why something so recent could ever reach values like $80,000 as some viral claims suggest. The truth is more complicated. In most normal cases, a standard 2009 birth and early childhood penny is worth only face value or slightly more in uncirculated condition. However, extremely rare mint errors, experimental strikes, or exceptional grading situations can dramatically increase value in the collector market. But claims of extremely high prices should always be viewed carefully, because the coin world is full of exaggeration and viral misinformation. Still, what makes this coin fascinating is not just its potential value, but its story. It represents a turning point in modern US coin design. It marked the first time in over 50 years that the reverse of the Lincoln cent was changed. It also created a wave of public interest, where ordinary people started checking their pocket change more carefully, hoping to find something special. And that is where the real magic of this coin lies. It changed perception. Collectors often say that coins like this are not just metal, but miniature history books. And in the case of the 2009 Lincoln birth and early childhood cent, that statement feels especially true. It captures a moment in time, both in Lincoln's life and in the evolution of US currency design. Now imagine this for a moment. A simple penny, possibly sitting in an old jar, a drawer, or even still passing through everyday transactions, could carry more interest than its face value suggests. While most will remain common, a few exceptional examples continue to surprise collectors who know exactly what to look for. That is why coin enthusiasts never stop searching. Because history doesn't always come in museums or books. Sometimes, it comes back to you in the form of a small copper-colored cent that most people ignore. And maybe, just maybe, the next time you look at a penny dated 2009, you'll take a second glance before spending it. Because in the world of coin collecting, awareness is everything. And sometimes, awareness is what separates ordinary change from extraordinary discovery. If you think a penny is just a 1-cent coin that disappears into pockets, jars, and vending machines without a second thought, then the story of the 2009 Lincoln cent might completely change the way you see everyday change forever. Because there was a moment in modern US mint history when a single penny stopped being just currency and became a storyteller. A small piece of copper-colored metal that quietly carries the life journey of one of the most influential figures in American history. And in 2009, that journey continued with a design that captures something deeply important: Abraham Lincoln's formative years in Indiana. Now picture this for a moment. A young Lincoln, not yet a president, not yet a national symbol, but a boy growing up in the rough frontier lands of Indiana. Dense forests, wooden cabins, hard labor, and almost no comfort. This was not a glamorous beginning. It was a life shaped by survival, discipline, and constant struggle. And that exact chapter of his life was chosen by the United States Mint to be permanently engraved on one of the most widely circulated coins in the world. The result was the 2009 Lincoln cent, formative years, a design, a coin that looks simple at first glance but carries a powerful narrative hidden inside its details. On the reverse side, instead of the familiar long-running Lincoln Memorial design that generations had grown used to, collectors and everyday people suddenly saw a completely different scene. A young Abraham Lincoln is shown reading while sitting on a log, symbolizing his self-education. Behind him stands a rustic log cabin, representing the Indiana wilderness where he spent much of his youth. Everything about the design feels quiet, reflective, and deeply human. It doesn't show power. It shows growth. And that is exactly what makes this coin special. Because unlike coins that celebrate victories or monuments, this one focuses on learning, hardship, and personal development. It reminds us that even the most powerful leaders in history started from extremely humble beginnings. But the story of this coin doesn't end with its design. In fact, that is just the beginning. In 2009, the United States Mint made a historic decision. Instead of producing just one reverse design for the Lincoln cent, they released 4 different designs in a single year. Each one representing a different stage of Lincoln's life. This had never been done before in the history of the Lincoln penny, which had maintained a stable reverse design for decades. The formative years in Indiana was the second design in this series, following his birth and early childhood in Kentucky. Together, these coins created a visual biography of Lincoln, told through currency that millions of people would handle without even realizing its deeper meaning. These coins were minted in massive quantities, primarily in Philadelphia and Denver, and released into general circulation. That means many of them are still out there today, passing through hands, cash registers, and coin jars without much attention. But here is where things get interesting for collectors. Even though the coin is common in circulation, not all examples are equal. The condition of a coin plays a massive role in its desirability. A penny that has never been circulated, still carrying its original mint shine, sharp details, and flawless surfaces, is considered far more valuable than one that has been worn down through years of use. This is where grading systems come into play, evaluating coins under strict standards and assigning them a quality score. The higher the grade, the more serious collectors begin to pay attention. Now add another layer, mint errors. In some rare cases, coins come out of the mint with small mistakes. This can include misaligned strikes, doubled images, off-center printing, or unusual surface variations. While most of these errors are minor, the coin collecting world is full of people who actively search for them because even a small imperfection can sometimes turn a common coin into a highly desirable collectible. For the 2009 formative years cent, error versions and high-grade uncirculated examples are where most of the collector interest lies. However, it's important to stay grounded here. Despite many viral claims online suggesting extreme values, the reality is more measured. Most of these coins are still worth face value in everyday condition. Even in uncirculated condition, they typically sell for modest amounts depending on demand, grading, and market timing. But what keeps this coin fascinating is not just its price potential. It is the emotional and historical weight it carries. Every detail on this coin was carefully chosen to reflect Lincoln's intellectual development. The book in his hands represents his self-taught education. The cabin represents isolation from formal schooling. The forest around him represents the raw environment that shaped his resilience. In a way, this coin is not just about Lincoln's past. It is about the idea that greatness can begin in the most unlikely places. And that message is one of the reasons collectors and historians continue to pay attention to this series, even years after its release. When the 2009 Lincoln cents were first introduced, many people didn't realize they were witnessing a temporary but historic redesign. After 2009, the US Mint returned to a more standard reverse design for the Lincoln cent series. That means these 4 designs exist only in a single year, making them a unique chapter in modern coinage history. That exclusivity adds another layer of interest for collectors. Because in coin collecting, rarity is not always about age. Sometimes it is about limited production windows, special commemorations, and short-lived designs that can never be reproduced again. And this is exactly what the formative years cent represents. A snapshot of a specific design experiment, tied to one of the most important figures in American history, released into billions of coins, yet still carrying hidden gems for those who know what to look for. So when people talk about valuable pennies, it is not always about dramatic overnight riches. More often, it is about awareness. Understanding what you are holding. Recognizing details that others overlook. And appreciating that even modern coins can carry historical and collectible significance. And that is why collectors still search through rolls of pennies, bank bags, and old collections. Because even in a world of digital payments, physical coins still exist. And as long as they exist, there is always a chance of finding something special. The 2009 formative years Indiana cent stands as a reminder of that possibility. A small piece of metal that connects everyday life to history, education, and the early struggles of a man who would eventually reshape a nation. And maybe, the next time you come across a 2009 penny, you won't see it as just 1 cent anymore. You might see it as a story, quietly waiting in your hand.